Hey everybody, Dutch Sense here. 2:44 a.m. Central Time on Thursday, January 22nd, 2015. And I've done a lot of coverage on the United States lately as the activity has been progressing across the edge of the craton from the west coast to the east coast, producing multiple 4.0 earthquakes. I think it's now appropriate at this point to do an international forecast and let my international viewers as well as the rest of the world know what's going on that you're not going to be hearing from the professionals, certainly not hearing from the professionals for several reasons, and we can go into that later. But just wanted to show you guys the activity that's happened over the last 7 days, and this is everything 4.0 and greater internationally and in the US. And I can take this down all the way and show you all the earthquakes in the US and the small swarms like in Hawaii where we have a new lava flow kicking up and a 3.0 and multiple 2.0 earthquakes. But I really want to draw your attention to this larger activity happening internationally. And again, we're looking at everything, let's just make sure this is 4.0 and greater. Okay. And really, it stands out above all else. Now you're going to see these raised off the planet. The higher these are off the planet, the deeper they are into the Earth. This is an Earthquake 3D feature, which you guys can download a free copy of Earthquake 3D, and you can put any background you want on this. As long as it's a TGA file. So I'll put a link down below to that if you're interested in following earthquakes yourself and starting to plot these out on the map and follow their progression. In following their progression, you can determine an area to watch specifically for excessive movement. Now when you look at this, you say, oh gosh, this is so many earthquakes. Even myself looking at this now after 4 years of looking at earthquakes, this is one of the greatest amount of earthquakes that I've seen, 4.0 and greater internationally, in such a short amount of time. This normally looks like something out of a 30-day plot. No joke. So you can see the earthquakes, extend all the way around the West Pacific and terminate up here in Alaska, where we have a silent area between, let's say, South Alaska and Vancouver, British Columbia, and then a few moderate earthquakes that have kicked off here off the West Coast, but nothing too big. And then silence throughout Mexico for the last several, now let's just say several months. There hasn't been any large-scale movement anywhere here in the East Pacific, from Central America and in Mexico all the way up to Vancouver, just a few 6.0s. Internationally, let me turn these rings down. Now these are the range rings. They show you a potentially affected area where somebody might feel the earthquake. We'll turn these down just so you can see where they're occurring. And now it looks like a pincushion, okay? But when you look at this, you can see that the entire perimeter of the West Pacific has moved at least, most of it at a 5.0 or greater level. Let's take this up one notch and look only at the larger earthquakes. Okay, there we go. So this is 5.0 and greater. And again, we have some deep earthquakes that are happening in an area that's called the asthenosphere. And the asthenosphere is about 300 to 350 miles down into the Earth, and it's an area of semi-melted magma that is being displaced at only certain areas, and we see this time and time again. So we'll see a deep earthquake in the asthenosphere near Chile, deep earthquake near Vanuatu, and then deep earthquakes up here near Japan. So to see these deep earthquakes, let me just take it down to the 4.0 level. And you can really see that they stand out just in certain areas. Now these are what I believe are geomagnetic conjugate points. Now this is getting really technical, but the Earth has magnetic strings that emanate out from the core of the Earth, out up into the upper ionosphere and magnetosphere, and back down here to the South Pole, let's say from the North Pole to the South Pole. But it's not that direct. There will be different spots on the Earth that have different geomagnetic conjugate points. And nuclear physicists studied this when they were doing the nuclear test, and the Van Allen belts. They found that when they detonated a nuclear bomb on a certain place down here in the South Atlantic, it caused a geomagnetic disturbance up here in the North Atlantic, a radio blackout. And that was due to the magnetic strings being interfered with. Now the string terminology has been used for areas like HAARP, up in Alaska, and ISCAT over in Tromsø, Norway, or the MEW in Japan, or the Sura in South America. All of these facilities manipulate those magnetic strings. Okay, those are man-made facilities. But naturally speaking, we have geomagnetic conjugate points as well. It could very well be, and I don't know if this is a fact, but you might find out that the geomagnetic conjugate point for Chile is over here in Japan. Okay, so that could be causing earthquakes deep down in the asthenosphere, something 350 miles up in the ionosphere. Let's say a disturbance with the sun could indeed cause 350 miles down into the earth a disturbance magnetically. And again, we're talking about basic physics, basic magnetics, basic electricity here. But the flow is going to go down to the center of the earth magnetically, electrically, particle-wise. Everything is going to travel down that corridor, that magnetic corridor, down to the core of the earth, where we will see a disturbance. And those disturbances at 350 miles deep are then followed by shallower disturbances of larger events. So we'll see a cluster of 4.0 earthquakes happen here, let's say, north of Fiji, and then we'll see a cluster of 5.0 shallow earthquakes as the plate adjusts to the deep movement that's happening in these specific areas. Same thing down here in South America. Look, we first saw a deep 5.0, and the darker these are, of course, the darker red, that's the age of the earthquake. So the darker they are, the older they are in the week. So we saw literally a deep earthquake and then a series of shallower earthquakes, and that is what holds true around the planet. So when we're looking at these areas, we can now try to determine an area to watch. And let me show you what I look for. I look for cluster spots, and I watch the adjacent area where it's silent for possible large-scale movement, or the areas in between these cluster spots. So we're looking at all those 4.0s. Let's get those off the map. And since we're looking for a possible large earthquake, and I'm talking about something in the 7 to 8.0 range or greater, due to this movement happening in 7 days' time, the entire West Pacific from Sumatra to Fiji, north to Japan, has moved all on a 5.0 or greater level. And it has spilled up through China and Russia and over into Alaska. Okay, so it's terminated right here. That lets you know the area in between Fiji and New Guinea is under tremendous pressure because this whole plate has moved. Also, Sumatra has to be under tremendous pressure. Okay, and a 4.5, now I can't take this off as just the most recent earthquake, that's why it's showing as a 4.0. But this 4.5 just struck down here at the South Indo-Australian plate where they meet. Now there was a series of 9.0 earthquakes, borderline nines, that struck in 2012 that very few people know about. Those back-to-back 9.0 earthquakes were the Indo-Australian plate fracturing, and that's the professional's determination. So over here in the West Pacific, let's turn down the range rings so we can get a better idea of where these are occurring, and that'll let you know also the areas that are silent in between. So we're looking at South Japan to Taiwan, maybe far south as North Philippines, as an area where we definitely need to watch for possible large-scale adjustment based upon the other movement, and we know that this part here, this part of the plate, has to move when you've seen the rest of the plate move entirely along the edge. And again, that's moved from just east of Papua New Guinea, just west of Fiji, right here, west through Papua New Guinea, all the way into Indonesia, and then we have Sumatra far over here where the massive tsunami happened many years ago, and all those people were unfortunately hurt in that massive earthquake. But we're looking at a time right now where we're at the level, if not greater, than where we were when the Japan mega quake happened. We are actually, I truly believe, you can go back and watch my videos from the time, and I have in the last few months, that we are at a greater heightened level of larger earthquakes in that 5.0 range, 4 and 5.0 range in this region than we were in 2011 when the mega quake happened. Preceding that mega quake, there was a 7.2 in the spot where the mega quake struck. A preceding 7.2, 2 days before the mega quake, 7.2 hit roughly the same area in Japan. So that was preceded by a larger earthquake. So let's hope that we're looking at that 7 to 8.0 earthquake, and that it strikes somewhere where it's relatively unpopulated. You know, down here in the southern Japan region, there's been a flurry of earthquake activity and a flurry of, down here in South Japan, there has been a flurry of volcano activity. And now volcanic activity kicking off around the entire Pacific. Again, new eruptions that we're watching for based upon the movement happening deep down in the asthenosphere. You'd almost have to go back and watch my previous earthquake updates and just sit there and click through them and just, get your popcorn and get a cup of coffee and really just put up with my voice for a while and sit there and listen to what I'm talking about over the last several weeks and months. Because as we're seeing these earthquakes progress across the Pacific, they transfer. And look at the silent area. The silent area which must show compensation for the movement here in the West Pacific at some point. So not only are we watching here in the silent areas, we are also watching here in the silent areas. Now this is a huge silent area. We can nail it down by looking at the smaller earthquakes, and that's why I'm doing my other earthquake updates, guys. So you can know where in the US and in Canada where to watch. And you know that when we're seeing this kind of activity along the plate in the US, that's due to pressure coming from the northwest, and there's no big earthquake activity happening in the northwest. That lets you know. Pressure here, pressure here. The areas in between are moving. So we have to watch for the moderate to 5.0 activity down here near Los Angeles and Salton Sea. But I don't want to get too much into the US. I've already spent multiple videos covering that. You guys can go watch that. But like in 2011, new collapses, new flows in Hawaii. You remember Kilauea emptied in 2011? I'll put a link down below, which you guys gotta see if you haven't seen it, which is in 2011, right before the Japan earthquake. Kilauea completely emptied. And it's an impressive video to watch. Yeah, you guys can just watch that link down below. So let's get back to the earthquake forecast really quick. I digressed. You can see the earthquakes have spilled across all of Asia and terminated over here in Europe. One area in Europe where we haven't seen any activity in a long time is North Italy. North Italy going into South France, possibly as far northeast as Poland. Right here in this U-shaped region, we need to watch for possible large movement. Look what's going on. Iceland here, that's Bardarbunga, that's right along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, by the way. All the way up here north, south of Svalbard, up at the North Pole, another swarm out to sea at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Further movement down the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, all the way here even with South America and Africa, and then all the way down to the South Pole. More multiple earthquakes right along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, from North Pole to South Pole, 7 days time, and extending around the Pacific, all the way up to Central America where we have our silent point, and then back over to Alaska. Back over here in Europe, I mean, really, you can just follow the earthquakes. They trace right along where their pressure is transferring. Pressure does transfer. Earthquakes are related to one another over a distance. These earthquakes here are related to these earthquakes here in Greece. They are. They are being pushed. The entire plate, the structure of Russia, China, India, they said it could never happen. It was too far of an area to be displaced by one force. Unfortunately, what we're talking about is a force from deep within. We're talking about a force coming up, welling up from underneath in the asthenosphere, 350 miles down, displacing, literally displacing the Pacific plate, causing a rise across all of North America. The entire state of California rising a ½ inch in 1 year. This past year. That rise is the same thing that's being caused over here in the West Pacific, pushing to the west, causing displacements along multiple fault lines, producing all of these earthquakes. The areas that are silent are areas where stress is building. The stress builds to a certain point and it releases. Hopefully it will release in a moderate activity, something in that 4 to 5.0 range, so we're not talking too much damage. But the longer it goes silent, the longer the pressure builds. When the activity is showing in this amount, again, let's turn these down so we can see these silent areas. Only a few here in the West Pacific. So we're talking, again, from Tokyo south to Guam, as far west as the North Island of the Philippines, and then the silent area of Papua New Guinea, completely silent across the entire country, and then either side going non-stop. That area, this area, and then far West Pacific, that would be where the single lone 4.7 is resting here along the Indo-Australian Ridge. One more area to watch would be the area south of Fiji, north of New Zealand, going as far north as Fiji, as one additional possible place to watch over the next several days. And all my earthquake forecasts are for 7 days or less, and they have been very accurate. It's based upon a method of nailing down earthquakes that are happening in adjacent areas and watching for patterns based upon basically activity that's already occurring. So I hope this helps everybody. Of course, if you want to try to forecast earthquakes, you need to keep track of earthquakes. You need to monitor the small earthquakes and large earthquakes, and eventually you will figure out that there is a pattern that's happening. I tend to show that more and more in my videos, and you can watch the last 3.5 years of videos to understand the previous forecast, how we were able to do it, how we're able to determine one earthquake based upon another, one earthquake leading to another. Overall, guys, all I can say is if you live in the West Pacific, if you live in the Pacific Northwest, or if you live near Mexico City, have an earthquake plan ready. Be prepared just in case. Don't be scared. Be prepared. If you live in those areas, you most likely already have an earthquake plan ready. But it's a good idea to dust them off, okay? We're at that time. It's been long enough. It's been several years since the large megaquake in Japan, which was the last major fatal quake. There have been several where people have been injured and several people have been killed, but the last major megaquake was Japan. And again, I cannot stress this enough. We did not see this level of activity in 2011 before the megaquake. It was even less than this, so this is greater. This has superseded that. That lets me know it's time to warn my viewers, time to let the world know we need to be on watch in the near term for possible large-scale movement. Most likely in the West Pacific, most likely in one of the silent areas that needs to compensate for all this additional movement that's happened over the last 7 days. I hope I'm wrong. I hope this completely dies out, that the new volcanic eruptions that I'm reporting on over here, if you guys want to come over to my Facebook page, not trying to self-promote, but it's the only place I know that's actually posting this stuff all day long. You can just come over and check and look at the volcanic eruptions that are occurring. The newest one down in Mexico City, we've got Sakurajima starting to blow some smoke again. We've got Nishinoshima that just blew. We've got the new island in Tonga that just formed. And this is all just in the past couple weeks. Okay? And that's just the few that I can name off the top of my head. There's many, many more. Several more. And volcanoes that haven't shown activity or eruptions in many years are the ones that are erupting. Okay, guys? So be safe. Much love. Cheers.